Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be discussing how voter turnout will affect the 2020 presidential election. The site we'll be using today is the United States Elections Project, which is an organization focused on election statistics, specifically tracking turnout in basically every federal election in US history. However, when looking at the upcoming presidential election this November, there are a ton of different scenarios that could occur. The first is that we have record low turnout as the coronavirus pandemic continues to spike once again, causing record low in-person turnout. Obviously, if this is the case, we will most likely see more mail-in ballots cast than ever before. However, it's also very likely that many states and counties refuse to give out all mail-in ballots, citing voter fraud concerns. In this scenario, mail-in ballots won't be able to overcome incredibly low in-person turnout, resulting in around 40% or possibly even lower national turnout. So say this happens, how would that affect the 2020 electoral map? Well, starting out, why don't we look at the electoral map as things stand right now. Nevada is a lean blue, Arizona a very, very marginal tilt blue, Colorado in the likely column, New Mexico in the safe column. As for the other Democratic states, Wisconsin is a tilt in favor of the Democratic Party. Minnesota is between a likely and a lean. I'm going to keep it as a lean for now. Michigan also a lean. Pennsylvania a tilt. New Hampshire is a lean in favor of the Democratic Party. Minnesota's two at-large electoral votes are lean, I'd say, right now in the favor of the Democratic Party. Its first congressional district is safe. Virginia is also a likely in favor of the Democratic Party, while Florida rounds it out at tilt for Joe Biden and the Democrats. Now, as for the Republicans, Texas is currently between a lean and a tilt in Texas. I'm going to keep it as a lean for now. Georgia is a tilt. North Carolina is a tilt. Ohio is a lean, as is Iowa. So that about, what am I missing here? Oh, the congressional districts here. In Nebraska's second congressional district, I'm really between the two, but right now I'm actually going to have it as I was going to go with tilt Dem, but I'm going to keep it at tilt red for now. Maine's second congressional district at lean for the Republicans. So as you can see, the electoral map stands at 318 electoral votes to Joe Biden to 220 for Donald Trump. So what would this 40% nationwide voter turnout affect? First of all, the immediate thing to sort of equate here is that lower turnout means better results for the Republicans, higher turnout means better results for the Democrats. That's just kind of the dynamic of the situation when it comes to turnout in national elections. So what could possibly go wrong for the Democrats if only about 40% or lower of the nationwide registered voters actually turn out? Well, for one, in the state of Arizona, I think for any chance of the state of Arizona to go blue this November, since it's typically more of a conservative state, it needs to have a much higher turnout than it does in normal elections. Arizona is not well known for a very high turnout, and especially now with Maricopa County being the fastest growing city in the country, or county that is in the country, Phoenix, the metropolitan area, being the fastest growing metropolitan and city area in the country, they've registered a lot of new Democrats, and they're really going to need the Democratic Party, that is, to whip out the votes in those kind of areas across the state of Arizona if they want any chance of flipping it. Arizona is an extremely close state. It's an effective toss-up with polling data being very, very close, and given that it's typically not a Democratic state in presidential elections, I think that if voter turnout is low at around 40%, Arizona is more likely to go to the Republican Party than it is to go to the Democratic Party. Now, as for the upper Rust Belt, now the Rust Belt is an interesting one because typically we actually see pretty high voter turnout across the West Rust Belt, except for states like Pennsylvania, where the Democrats actually have a huge voter registration edge. They do as well in Wisconsin and Michigan, which is why it was very interesting to see it go to the Republicans in 2016, despite such a high relative voter turnout. Now, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, those are the only two states that I could possibly see moving over towards the Republican column. I think Wisconsin and Pennsylvania with a lower voter turnout are much more of a toss-up. I wouldn't feel safe at all saying that they'd go to the Democratic Party, whereas I also wouldn't feel completely safe that they would go to the Republican Party given Joe Biden's polling advantage there. Now, as for the state of Florida, now Florida is an interesting one. Obviously, a much higher, older population there. Typically a state that is used to voting in mail-in ballots, so I don't actually think that it would necessarily affect Florida all that much to have lower voter turnout. I think Florida, for the most part, is going to vote mail-in this November, so I don't think that, in general, low in-person turnout is really going to affect the election in the state of Florida. Obviously, it's an extremely crucial swing state and one that both campaigns are going to work on very, very hard, no matter what happens in terms of the coronavirus pandemic as we progress further and further into the fall. But one thing to note is that the 2020 Democratic primary there in the state of Florida, which started right around where the coronavirus was starting to hit its peak and really starting to ramp up, Joe Biden had really record voter turnout in the state of Florida and fared really well there. So I don't really feel like Florida is one that's going to be affected that much. And that's why I would still keep it as more of a tilt in favor of the Democratic Party. The state of Texas, the state of Georgia, and North Carolina, if the Democrats want any plausible chance of winning any of these three states, they're going to need extremely high voter turnout. So if anything, I think we could see Texas possibly move further into the Republican category, maybe even like a likely. Georgia could move into the lean column, North Carolina could move into the lean column, but this is all just hypothetical again. So I think overall, if we see lower turnout, we're going to see states like Texas, Georgia, and North Carolina be a lot safer for the Republican Party, as is the state of Arizona, probably more in the tilt direction. Now, states that are usually typically expected to vote mail-in, that includes the state of California. Obviously, the state of California is not going to be competitive whatsoever. But Florida, for example. The second scenario I'll be discussing is a mediocre nationwide turnout, where enough voters go to the polls and enough mail in their ballots to have 2020 around maybe 2012 numbers. Basically, no matter what happens, the voter turnout will in all likelihood be lower this year than it would have been if it weren't for the pandemic. With the polarization of modern day politics and record levels of excitement on both sides, we very well could have seen record-shattering nationwide turnout this year. That being said, in this mediocre turnout scenario, how will the electoral map look? Now, this is where I think it'll shift more into where probably the average forecast is. So that would be Wisconsin in the tilt column, Michigan in the lean, Pennsylvania maybe in the tilt column for the Democrats, Texas maybe in the lean to likely column, Georgia maybe still in the lean column, North Carolina in the tilt column. All the rest I think would remain basically the same. Arizona, again, I think the only way the Democrats really do realistically flip it is with high turnout, so I'm going to keep it as a toss-up for now. But overall, I don't think there's going to be too much an effect between low voter turnout and mediocre voter turnout. Either way, I think the Democrats have a much better chance of winning this election than the Republicans do, or Joe Biden has a much better chance of winning this election than Donald Trump does, just because of polling numbers and all of the data pointing in favor of his direction, especially with Donald Trump's dwindling approval numbers that are starting to move up maybe a little bit in recent days, but not anywhere close to enough for a incumbent president to really feel comfortable heading into re-election. But overall, I think mediocre turnout isn't really going to affect this election all that much as compared to where the forecasts and polls have it as of right now. Now, where I do think things could possibly change is, finally, let's take a look at the record-shattering voter turnout map. This could be the case if mail-in balloting is federally mandated and we could see lower coronavirus numbers by November. I seriously do believe this could end up happening, and we see voter turnout in the mid to upper 60s or possibly even higher. While more people voting should be a good thing no matter what side you're on, it's almost certainly going to be a Democratic advantage. Democrats have a voter registration edge and nationwide and in most swing states, but they consistently struggle to turn out their voters. So how would this map look like if there was a voter turnout in the 65% to 70% range, which would be record-shatteringly high? Now, obviously, with that in mind, I think Arizona is much more likely to go to the Democrats. Maybe even a lean classification for them in Arizona, however, still a tilt there. I think states like, this is the only scenario in which states like Texas could possibly become really effective toss-ups and maybe even a tilt in the Democratic column. Now, Texas is typically one of the lowest voter turnout states in the entire country, which has seen Democrats actually in more higher voter turnout elections, such as the 2018 midterms, actually be competitive statewide in the state of Texas. There are a lot of more minority groups in the state of Texas that don't vote as often as the more conservative white groups in the state of Texas. So with a higher turnout, say in the 65 to 70% range, maybe we see Texas really become an effective toss-up. Maybe we see Georgia, which a lot of people want to say is a toss-up already, even in a mediocre turnout election. I think Georgia could possibly move into the tilt range in a high voter turnout election. North Carolina could also move into the tilt column. I don't think it's going to affect Iowa and Ohio all that much, but overall, I just think that in a higher voter turnout election, Obviously, I don't really know. We can't really say specifically what's going to happen to the electoral map. But as you can see, Joe Biden will definitely have a much bigger advantage if we see a much higher voter turnout this year than in years past. And that basically does it for today's video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you all so much for watching. Please make sure to comment more video suggestions down below. And if you haven't liked or subscribed already, please do so. Tune in next time.